Okay, welcome everybody to the 7th session in our Senior Safety Series. Unison at Viner and Strathcona Centre provide fitness, fun, food and friendship, along with information and support on how to stay safe. We build new programs based on needs identified in our community within our service delivery. In our elder abuse case management program, we believe one way we can prevent elder abuse is by learning ways to keep safe and how to keep safe. Another thing we can do is rely on friends in our community who will provide more details in just a moment when they come up and they speak and introduce themselves in just a few minutes. Our agenda today. Our agenda is flexible, as you can see, with time for questions and answers. We hope you share the information package that you've received with your family and friends. Everybody got that today at the beginning. And just before 11 a.m., we will have a stretch and a refreshment break. But please stretch or take a break or get a refreshment at any point while we're talking. We will break at noon for lunch and return at 12:30 for the second part of our session. Washrooms are across the hall for the women, and then to the left and down the hall for the men. We hope you spend a few minutes completing our questionnaire that we've put in that package for you on how you found the session helpful and any sort of advice back to us. It's helpful for us to let our funders know, the Elder Abuse Awareness Council and the Community Foundation of Southeastern Alberta, and to let them know that their money is spent well. In 2021 and 2022, our statistics showed many seniors just needed a little extra help. But they relied on trusted friends or family who ended up taking advantage of them emotionally and financially. Today, we will learn how little things we can do make a big difference to someone at risk of experiencing elder abuse. This is a new resource that you may find helpful. If you have access to internet and a computer, feel free to check out this user-friendly guide on elder abuse. Now, let's hear from our guest speakers, and we're going to be starting with Chantel, and she can come up and introduce herself.
Welcome everybody. My name is Chantel Ottenbright, and I'm with the City of Medicine Hat as a community resource worker. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the It's Not Right, Neighbours, Friends and Family presentation. And the way that I got kind of introduced to this is, so I've been working with seniors and older adults for probably close to 20 years now. I started out actually working out of the Viner Centre as one of the resource workers when the City of Medicine Hat operated it. And we were finding that we were getting a lot of calls about people misusing funds or people not treating others that well, older adults, and we said, hey, we think that there might be some issues going on here. We're going to look into this. So at that time, elder abuse was kind of just a term that was pretty new and coming to the forefront. And we started to speak with some of our colleagues across the province, and sure enough, there was this movement towards wanting to work together to address elder abuse. And so the Alberta Elder Abuse Awareness Council was formed. And I was lucky enough to be part of the council up until June of just last year, and I was the chair for the council for about the last, I think it was about 8 years. And so as part of that, many of the things that we are going to be talking about and many of the resources that you've got in your package have come from that. We also developed the Staying Safe Handbook, which we'll go through a little bit later this morning. But this presentation was a partnership with Western University and an individual by the name of Margaret McPherson, who was their lead researcher. And they were doing some research into who was best positioned to be able to help older adults who were maybe in situations of elder abuse. And what they found is most often older adults felt comfortable telling a friend or a family member first, rather than seeking those formal supports, going to police, going to an outreach worker, going even to a senior center, something like that. And so with that knowledge, and recognizing too that often it's those people who are in our everyday lives that we're passing in the hallways or that we're seeing at our social events who often recognize the signs first. She thought it would be a great idea and a good opportunity to develop some training so that people felt more equipped to be able to have some of these conversations and to just pay attention to what they're seeing. So that's where the It's Not Right Neighbors, Friends and Family presentation comes from. So I hope that it will be helpful. We're going to use several videos. We're going to start with the content, and then we'll move into some videos that are scenarios. They've been developed with some Canadian actors and actresses, and so you might recognize them from some of the Canadian content and shows. But hopefully it will also help you to be able to get a real-world sense of what it is these can look like. So we're not going to get into too much about what abuse of older adults is, because we do have different presentations, and I think you have some information in your pamphlet about, we can talk about what types of abuse there are, and we might go into a little bit about that, but we're not going to talk about too much about the warning signs or what to be watching for. That's a little bit of a different training. In this one, we just are going to talk about generally what abuse is. So we talk about it in terms of causing harm to older adults and putting limits and controls on their rights and freedoms. That's often one of the tactics. We would call that a tactic. They use that as kind of a way to be able to gain control over someone. And the older adults are unable to freely make choices because they're afraid of being hurt, humiliated, left alone, or of the relationship ending. So abuse is not just being impolite or being rude or even having a conflict, because we often, in relationships, we're going to have conflict. Over the course of a lifetime of a relationship, it's actually even important to have conflict sometimes because we can build a better, stronger relationship. That's not what abuse is. Abuse is when one person uses the power or influence that they have over another person to take advantage or to gain power or control over them. And neglect sometimes comes into the conversation as well, because older adults who cannot manage on their own may also rely on the support of others. And so sometimes withholding either options of care, access to medication or services that they need, or even accessibility implements and things like that, mobility aids, can be a way that they're abusing somebody by withholding. So that would be in the neglect. We also talk about domestic violence, also growing older, and I'm going to leave most of this for Peggy to speak to a little bit more. But as we age, sometimes people who have experienced domestic violence do continue to experience it. What we have found is that they aren't reporting it perhaps as much or seeking help, and so that's a concern for us as well. Because we know that as we age, there may be additional risk factors that go along with being in that domestic violence relationship, because maybe our mobilities and ability to get around and get out of a home changes. Perhaps there's other challenges in our health or our cognitive abilities that may be shifting as well. And so there's some additional risk factors that we want to be paying attention to in some of those domestic violence situations that have grown older as well. So again, abuse means a power imbalance. So somebody has power over another person and tries to make them feel small, alone, powerless. So when we talk about abusive behavior, we often think that it can be really raging and somebody yelling and calling someone names, or maybe that they're physically abusing them. But it can also be financial abuse, it can also be spiritual abuse, and it can also include neglect as well. So sometimes when we see it as abusive behavior, you might be seeing it or recognizing some of the first signs as being somebody is controlling another person. They might be restricting who has access to the person, so not letting them take phone calls, not letting people come and visit them, not taking them to doctor's appointments or to other places, or if they do, not allowing them to be alone with the doctor or with care aides, that sort of thing. They're often quite present when phone calls are coming in or when other people are there, because they want to monitor and control what is being said and making sure that the older adult isn't disclosing anything. So there's a real level of control that often people will see. There's also where we start to notice it as friends and family sometimes is people who used to come out to things. You used to come to the quilting club all the time, or you used to come to our aquasize group, and now you no longer come to that. What's changed? What's happening? It could be that someone is restricting your ability to go to those things. It can also include things like having access to their money and taking over finances. It might be that they've taken over bank accounts, they've put their name on house titles, they may have taken over the vehicle. There can be a whole host of things. They may have even taken out credit cards or loans in another person's name. So those are things we want to pay attention to as well, because sometimes it can be quite subtle, and sometimes there can be good reasons for something showing up. So we're just starting to pay attention to some of those red flags, and we want to identify what some of those might be. So these might be some of the things that we might start seeing. People often become depressed or withdrawn or look like they're quite fearful of somebody. There might be things like they might have to move quickly, or someone moves in with them. And that can really start a chain of events, which we're going to have an example of in our videos that we are going to come to. There might be unexplained injuries. There might be things like they're stopping attending things that they've always enjoyed to attend. Might be signs of neglect. They might start losing weight. It might be that their clothes are no longer clean, or their hair is no longer kept. If there's a change in the way that the person has always been operating, so if they've been a person who's been very concerned about the way that they present and look, making sure that their clothes are always the newest, or that they've always had their hair cut or their nails done, and then something changes, that's something that we want to be paying attention to. It can also be that things like their phone starts getting cut off, or there might be things that have been in their home, like televisions or computers or tech or other things that are valuable that might start go missing. And so we want to also be thinking about those things. So controlling behavior can be a warning sign, and some of the things that we can watch for would be things like somebody making all the decisions, especially without asking the older adult for their opinion or for what they want. They might start isolating them from friends and family. They might threaten them with violence or abandonment. If you don't do this, I'm not going to come anymore and visit you or take you to your doctor's appointments or get groceries for you. And if you're a person who's relying on that other person, that's a real concern, because now what? How will you get your food? How will you get to the doctor? So often those are the tactics that they're using to be able to get a person to go along with what they're wanting. There might be a disregard for privacy, as I mentioned. They might start reading or withholding the person's mail, again, taking over control of the money, and maybe even putting locks on the outside of their door to lock someone in their room. It's sad, but it's true. We've seen it many times. So we talk about it as kind of a little bit of a cycle that we go through. So there's abuse, and the person gets isolated because they're trying to isolate the person so they can't talk about the abuse. And the person feels ashamed, and maybe they feel a little bit like there's some blame on them and things like that. So then they isolate more. But being isolated then allows the abuse to continue and for no help to be put in place and for people not to see it. So it continues to spiral down, and it can become very difficult for a person to get out of that pattern, and it can be very difficult to get help into the situation once we've moved along that path very far. And it's very difficult for people to be living in this way, and so there's a lot of guilt and shame and fear, and even into depression and things like that. So again, we've talked about that it can happen to any person. It doesn't seem to matter. We've had younger seniors, we've had older seniors, we've had just a wide range of people that it's happened to. And I think that there's this myth that people have that they're, they've been in these positions of power, perhaps even in their working careers, and they've been really recognized in society for some reason as being a key person, that they'll be somehow immune to being a victim. But unfortunately, we don't see that to be the case. So it's just something to be paying attention to, and to, I think, be watching out for one another. So who behaves abusively towards older adults? Typically, it's not monsters. It's not the bad guy, the boogeyman who's over in the corner. It's people that we know. It's people who are already in our lives, unfortunately. And most often it is family members. Particularly, we find it's adult children or grandchildren or someone who's related in some way. It also can be people like friends. It can be paid or unpaid caregivers. It can be landlords. It can be a whole host of people, and I know Jeanette has had cases of all of these in our community. And it's just anybody who is in that position to be able to gain power and control over another person and seeks to do that. And they misuse that authority and that trust to take advantage. So sometimes people think, like, maybe I'm not sure if I'm being abusive, or I'm not sure if my behavior is that way. Some of the tips that we kind of say, because sometimes people are doing the best that they can, or they think they are, by doing some of these things, but without realizing that they're actually using abusive different tactics and things like that. So we do have some information about what to be watching out for if you think or are worried about somebody, that you're maybe abusing somebody. If someone is afraid of you, if you're starting to make all the decisions and you're not even checking in with the person as to what their wishes are, those are some really good signs. If you think you know what's best for another person and you don't even want to ask them, that might be a sign that you're kind of heading down that path. And also if you're starting to take money and possessions. And sometimes we make some justifications for these things. We've heard some people say, I'm going to get it anyway when a person passes away, so why not have access to their money and their items right now? But it's not yours, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and so it's not that this is the time to be able to take advantage of that. Other people feel like, well, I have needs that need to get met right now, and this older adult doesn't. They're going to be fine, so they won't miss the money. So we use some of these sort of things as ways to be able to justify behavior, but it doesn't matter. It's wrong, and it's not right to be able to take advantage of someone else.
Would you classify that as fraud?
It depends who it is, and it would depend what the behavior is or how they've taken advantage.
You said they took the money.
So it could be financial abuse. It could be fraud. Usually, typically, where we kind of make a distinction is fraud is somebody who's not in a relationship of trust in this situation with an older adult. If it is somebody who's in that relationship of trust, usually we would classify it as financial abuse, and which is a form of elder abuse. If it's frauds and scams, usually it's somebody who is unknown to you, but they've either called or they've stopped by and they've gained unlawful access to your finances and have taken advantage in that way. Yeah. So I would say that individual situations can get very, they differ, right? And so I think that's why we have to handle each one as unique and on its own and look at the circumstances and the situation. So if you have a particular situation that you're looking at, I would suggest that you either come talk to me or Jeanette DeVore, who is the elder abuse case manager here. I'm sorry if I got her title wrong in some way. But she would be able to assist as well and to talk through the situation with you to determine whether or not it falls within this or if there's a different route that would best fit. But you're right, there are different levels of and different routes that things can take. So sometimes things go through civil courts. Sometimes things are settled outside of court totally. Sometimes things move towards the criminal realm of things and go through the criminal courts. And there can be a mix of things as well. And so sometimes there are different levels of culpability, like of responsibility that people have and ethics that they should be maintaining. So it's just about figuring out for each of those situations where that lies and what the best route forward is. Yeah, you're welcome. And so again, just remembering the you power thing of every action that you have has an impact. So if you are doing these abusive behaviors, you're having an impact on older adults. And I'm going to try and switch because I have a video. So this requires technology and me switching. Hopefully it works.
Usually you have to exit out.
Okay.
PowerPoint. Yeah, there you go. Now you can play.
Thank you.
Are you sure you're going to be comfortable in the basement?
Yeah, there's plenty of room, Mom. Besides, your granddaughter will never be home. You're a lifesaver, Mom. I don't know what I would have done without you.
I'm sure you're going to find another job in no time.
mind if I watch a movie? By the way, your bank card was rejected at the gas station today. It was really embarrassing.
What are you talking about?
I went to fill up my car and it wouldn't go through. It must be overdrawn or something. Better hope your check comes in this week and you're not going to get your prescriptions refilled. What are you doing?
I can't get used to the damp downstairs.
Oh, try another blanket, Mom. We're boiling up here.
No, I would have wished you would have asked me before you moved me into the basement.
Why? Because I have to be on my back, Mom. It's too dark and dingy down there. I get depressed, you know that. Complete your puzzles down there as well as you can up here.
What's for dinner, Grams? I'm starving.
So what did you see in that video that might be like some red flags for you?
The whole thing.
The whole thing. Yeah. Great point, yes. Like how many people were like, oh, this doesn't feel good. Yeah, it's not a good situation. So we saw that he moved in. And he says, first of all, it's going to be temporary, and it's not going to be for long, and the granddaughter's never going to be here, and I'll get right back on my feet. But then we see he's using the bank card, right? And that it's overdrawn. So, and she clearly didn't have an awareness that it was overdrawn. And then what did he say about the prescriptions? Right. You're not going to get them if you don't have your check come in, so you better hope. So now she's going to be going without. And then we see that he's taking over the space, so he takes over her puzzle area, shuts out the light because he's watching the movie. And then next we see she's in the basement. So she's now living in the basement, and he's clearly in whatever the other bedroom that she was in before, and without her permission, because she says, I wish you would have asked me, right? And then the granddaughter is there, and she's starting to kind of show some of those same behaviors. What's for dinner, Graham? Like kind of a demanding without asking, without showing respect, right? Those kind of things. And we also see that he's kind of started to take over more and more of the space. It's not looking the same as it once did, right? So if you saw some of those signs in somebody who is your long-term friend, this might be something that you're starting to have some concerns about, right? So we're going to see, the lady is Francesca and Carla. These are the ladies, and they're going to have a conversation because her friend maybe starts to see some stuff.
How are things going with your son being home?
Oh, I feel badly for him. He's having such a hard time of it. He and his daughter moved upstairs on the weekend.
And where does that leave you?
In the spare room.
In the basement? Oh, I am sorry, but that is going too far. You still cater to his every whim when what he really needs is a swift kick in the pants. If you don't put your foot down, he's never going to leave that couch, never mind look for a job.
So in this first response, her friend tells her just how it is, hey? He needs a swift kick in the pants. But it doesn't necessarily help to invite a conversation. And actually she starts to kind of shut down, right? And she looks a little like, I don't know what to do. Like, now it is my fault. And I'm feeling that blame and that shame. So we're going to watch another scenario where she has a little bit of a different approach, and just watch for how that makes you feel any different and whether or not she responds differently. I'm just going to have to try and pull it up here.
How are things going with your son being home?
Oh, I feel badly for him. He's having such a hard time of it. He and his daughter moved upstairs on the weekend.
And where does that leave you?
In the spare room.
In the basement? I'm worried about you. Your life has changed so much. Are you okay?
So it's a little bit different there, right? Mm-hmm. So she instead says, I'm worried about you. Your life has changed so much. And she's opening the door to kind of more conversation. She's letting her know that she's there for her. So that's the kind of conversation we want to try and invite and we want to try and support. So how we do that is we have to try and overcome some of our hesitations. So sometimes when we see these situations, our first thing is like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do, and so I'm not going to say anything, and this is a private family matter, so I'm just going to stay right out of it. But if we can actually overcome that, and if we can try and be supportive without pushing and without being controlling, we can have a conversation to let someone know that we're concerned about them. And we have a little acronym that we use to help with this conversation. So we call it a sink it conversation. You see it, you name it, and you check it. So when we see something and we notice that we're feeling uncomfortable, it's not sitting right, we think there might be something more going on, we've recognized that maybe there's some signs that something's not quite right or that something has changed, and we want to be able to have a conversation about it, because usually these warning signs are like a tip of an iceberg, and there can be a lot more going on below, even like in this situation. So when they walk in and the friend hears that she's moved into the basement, and maybe she even sees that living room, right, which is quite a mess, she can recognize that a lot has changed. She doesn't know all the details about the finances necessarily. She might not know all the details about any of the other things going on, the withholding of prescriptions or things like that. But she knows something isn't right and something has changed, so she's going to want to have that conversation. And then we name it. So she says, Michael has moved in. How is that going? And then at that point, the friend can say, yeah, him and his granddaughter, the granddaughter have moved in, right? So we're naming it. We're not trying to be judgmental or to put things like she said about, if you don't do this, you need to give him a swift kick in the pants. If you don't lay down the law, he's never going to get off the couch. We don't want to be judgmental in making those kind of points. We want to make comments or things about things we've noticed or that we've seen. So maybe you could say something like, I saw him take money from your wallet. Or, I see that he's moved you down in the basement without asking. I see there's a lot of changes, and it looks like he's taken over your living room or something. You could name what you're seeing and where your concerns are. Does that make sense? Okay. So we don't want to jump to conclusions or make judgments, because that might put someone's guard up and they might become defensive or shut down at that point. And what we're trying to do is have an open conversation, or at least open the door to further information. And then we want to check in with them. Are you okay? I'm worried about you. What can I do? Can I help in any way? All of those are ways that we can check in with a person and let them know we don't need all the details and you don't have to tell us everything, but we're here for you. We're willing to help, or at least support you to get the help you need. And they may or may not choose to take that invitation at that point, but sometimes just knowing that, they may at another point come back and say, yeah, this is not okay and I can't live like this and I want to get help. Will you help me to go and find the person I need to talk to? We don't know when that might happen, but by letting the person know that you're there and you're supportive, at least we've opened the door and left it open for them to come and have that conversation. So this is just a refresh. So we see something, we're going to say the things, we see something that we feel is not right, and we have that gut check kind of feeling in our body of like, oh, this doesn't feel quite right. Then we're going to name it. So what are we seeing and what is our concern? I noticed you have a lot of bruises on your arms and I'm really concerned that something is going on. Then it opens the door to the person being able to share. Yeah, something is, or, oh no, I've just been on a new medication and it makes me have more bruises or something. Like there's at least an opportunity. And then you can let them know, okay, because I care about you and I'm worried and I want to make sure you're okay. We see it, we name it, we check it. We talk about it a little bit like a backpack because we want to handle it with care. So we also want to come at it from not trying to solve another person's problems or having to be the expert or knowing all the answers. We're just approaching it with safety and respect in mind because we want to respect the rights of the other person and we also want to make sure that they're safe. And so by letting them know that you care and that you're concerned about them, we're doing that with that safety and respect in mind. And you can offer to be able to go with them to get help if they're needing it. Some other tips that they kind of suggest would be to find a time when the person who is acting abusively isn't present. So in this situation, if the son was in the living room, for example, that might not have been the time to have that conversation. It might also still be an okay time to say, I'm worried about you, make sure that you're okay, and I'm here if you need something. You could do something more subtle, but if you're going to have this conversation and name things, you make sure that the other person, the potential abusive person, isn't there so that you're maintaining safety. Because if the person is using abusive tactics and they're aware that others are noticing things, the behavior may actually escalate and the older adult may be at more risk. So we want to make sure that we're trying to do it somewhere where we can do it kind of more privately. We also want to make sure that we're listening carefully so that we can hear what's going on and we can hear what's happening for the person and that we're respecting if they don't want to talk about things or if they don't want to access help at this time. It might mean that you still want to do something and learn a bit more or find out what those resources are so that if something happens and the person changes their mind, that you would have that information to help them. But we also need to respect their decisions because people have the right to make decisions, even if they're bad decisions. So we're always wanting to use respect when we're talking to people. But it sometimes is about awareness, and the person may not be at a point where they're aware or wanting to admit it. And so it may unfortunately have to continue on for that person until they're ready to admit or to access the help, right? You mean the victim, yeah, the older adult usually. Because we do want to respect their choices and their the decisions that they're making as well. So. We also want to start with heart. And what I love about this is that I think that this is a thing that people need to do with, regardless of what situation they're dealing with, is that we want to start from a place of genuine caring and concern. And if we let our heart and our concern in that way lead us, we're likely going to go in the right direction. And so from this point, we're just starting to say, we are concerned about you and we care about you and we want you to know that you don't have to do it alone, that you're not isolated and that people are out there who care about you and want what's best for you. And so then we can be supportive and offer that support to the person so that we can help them to get the help they need. So the goal for a SYNC-IT conversation is really that opening the door of support and helping to isolate or to reduce that isolation. So when we talked about that isolation abuse kind of cycle, this conversation actually stops that because it now lets the person know somebody is aware of what is going on in some of those changes because you've expressed to the person, I'm noticing something is different. So you've broken that isolation, and now if things continue, there's at least an ability to come back and say, you were right, or yes, things are getting worse and I don't want to live like this anymore, or I want to access supports because I want the behavior to stop. So that's also the goal of the SYNC-IT conversation. I'm going to play another video. And again, we'll see the two types of responses as well after.
Hello, Professor.
My brightest protege. Are we having lunch or is this a prison break?
Oh, this isn't so bad.
For an old folks home, you mean?
Yeah, well, ever since I signed my power of attorney over to my son, he moved his family into my house and trundled me off to this warren for the aged. I don't understand.
Is there something the matter?
It's my property taxes. They're like 2 years in arrears.
Shouldn't your son have taken care of this?
Yes, that's what I was led to believe, but oh well. Shall we?
We have a reservation down the street.
Yeah.
For one.
Yeah.
There you go. How's your son?
Well, I don't know really, because between the sailboat and the cottage and ski trips and Caribbean getaways, his need for me has been eclipsed.
Okay, so before we see the responses, what did you see as red flags for that one? Bills not being paid. Yep. Yeah, his clothes they're ill-fitting, they're dirty, they have holes in the armpits. Yep, good point. Anybody else?
His son has a lot of lavish things in his life that could have been from his money.
Yes, so he said his need for his dad has been eclipsed because he's got the cottage and the sailboat and the trips and it sounds like he's living pretty well, right? And maybe not on his own accord. And also that he moved his dad out of the house and put him in a home, and then he's taken over the family home, right? Yeah, so these are some of the concerns that I think Beth is hearing and she's getting concerned about. So maybe here's her inside voice of what she should have been thinking about.
There you go. How's your son?
Well, I don't know really, because between the sailboat and the cottage and ski trips and Caribbean getaways, his need for me has been eclipsed.
I hope that he's not spending your money. Is he? You need to put your foot down.
So definitely that might be something that we're thinking about, right? But by the comment, you need to put your foot down, she kind of places the blame back on him to say, you need to do something to stop this behavior. When really, I think from his first comments, it feels a little out of his control, right? Because he's recognizing that things aren't happening that are supposed to and that his son isn't coming to visit and these things are happening. So by her saying that, I think it shuts it down because now he's feeling like, oh, it's on me. I should have been doing something. I've let it get to this point. Whereas hopefully this is more supportive.
There you go. How's your son?
Well, I don't know really, because between the sailboat and the cottage and the ski trips and the Caribbean getaways, his need for me has been eclipsed.
Professor, I don't want to overstep my bounds. But if there's anything that I can do to help, I'm here.
How did that one make you feel? So much better, right? And really, she didn't need to point anything out. She just needed to say, I don't want to overstep, but I'm here if you need anything. She lets him know that she's there for that support, that he can talk to her. Yeah. So when we have that sink it conversation, it might be that the person is willing to talk and they want somebody to talk to. And in that case, we just need to be prepared that they may choose to share things with us. And some of the key things that we want to keep in mind, if somebody does, is that we let them know that we believe them and that it isn't their fault. These things happen and people use these tactics to gain power and control, and it's not your fault that it's happened to you. You can let them know that you're worried, especially if it's about their safety or you have concerns about that, and that you're going to support their decisions. That's really all you need to do. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't even need to know what those next steps are. You can just say, I'm here for you and I'm willing to support you. And even together, you can maybe look up what those resources are, which we will go into in kind of the second half of this. But for now and as part of that being prepared, those are kind of the key things that we say. Make sure that you say that you believe them and that you're there to support them. And so if it's happening to you and you're the one who's being hurt or threatened, we want you to tell somebody that you trust. We want you to know that you're the expert in your life and that the best person to decide what to do next is you, and that you can set those limits and increase your safety by doing so. Oftentimes I think people believe that I don't know what that was, but that was very loud. Oftentimes I think people believe that once they disclose something, that it's going to be out of their control, that things are going to start to happen and it's going to take on a life of its own. And generally speaking, I would say that's not accurate. We want to always work with the older adult or the victim to find out what it is that they want to do, how they want to proceed, what their best outcomes would be in the situation, and that we would work with them to go along that path so that it could proceed in the way that they would like. Because we never want to do something without someone's consent and without their agreement to this, because it's their life and they're the expert in it. There are some times where that can't be the case, in that if somebody doesn't have the capacity to any longer make their own decisions and they've been declared as not having that ability to continue to make their decisions, it might be outside of their ability to choose. But even in those where there is a decision maker in place, we always suggest still including the person in the conversation and getting their consent and agreement where possible in the process, so that they have, again, as much ability to have a say in things as they're able to. And then I think we're going to leave it there before we talk about the resources, because the way that Jeanette has set and the team has set up today is that I'm going to come back in a little bit and talk about more of the resources and that sort of thing. But first, before I head off, because I have just 3 minutes here, look at me going good on time. That's unusual, by the way, because I do like to chat. How are the videos? Are those helpful? Yeah? Okay. I have a few more if you think that they would be helpful to kind of look through. Okay, great. So when I come back, we'll talk about some of the resources, and then we'll go through a few more of the videos and scenarios, because we have some different ones that maybe are of interest to you, and we'll talk from there. Okay. Thanks so much for being so attentive and so engaged.